Hey, this is Todd Brown, and welcome to module number 5 of the Mentor to a Million program. Now, in this module, we're going to be talking about advanced prospect bonding. We're going to talk about how you actually bond with prospects. We're going to talk about the subtle psychology and tactics that master marketers use to not only bond with prospects, but to also counter sales resistance. Now, everything that we're going to cover through the rest of this module has application both throughout your marketing funnel as well as in all of your post-funnel communications. And so really what this module is about is creating a bond with prospects so that they like you, that they trust you, so that they have a relationship with you, making the entire sales process less painful for them and more enjoyable. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about very quickly is a quote from master advertising copywriter Gary Bencivenga, and it covers this whole idea that you need to sell yourself before you start selling anything else. Before you start selling somebody on a product, on the features, on the benefits, on the different benefits, on the offer, before you sell them on any of those things, you need to sell them on you. Listen to what Gary Bencivenga says about this. He says, quote, "People don't buy from others unless they believe them, unless they trust them." Now let's just stop for a second before I go on and read the rest of this quote. He's saying here flat out that people don't buy from people, from marketers, unless they believe those marketers, unless they trust those marketers, right? So unless your prospects believe you and trust you, at a bare minimum, people will not buy from you. Now, we've talked at great lengths throughout the MFA program about how to establish belief, right, by the use of proof, the different proof elements, and how to use different proof elements when, where, and how to build trust. And we're going to kind of just quickly, I think on one slide, on the next slide, as a matter of fact, quickly just recap the factors involved in trust building and whatnot. But again, people will not buy from you if they don't believe you and if they don't trust you, right? So let's get back to this quote. If you don't sell yourself first, meaning that if you don't sell the prospect on you, if you don't get them to believe you, if you don't get them to trust you first, before you get them to believe what you're saying about your product, buy into the product features, buy into the product benefits, if you don't sell yourself first, you're absolutely trying to shortcut the process, the sales process, by just rushing to the bottom line, rushing to the close of the sale too early. And so Gary really here is saying that before you do any other selling, you've got to sell yourself first. And so you lead off by selling you, right? There's this quote unquote sale that needs to be made before every other sale, before the main sale, so to speak. And that's the selling the prospect on you. And most specifically, it's selling them on the fact that you are trustworthy, right? And how do we sell people on your trustworthiness as it relates to your offer? It's mainly with two things. It's with track record and credibility, right? Your track record being one of the four legs of the four-legged stool that I introduced to you in the MFA program from Michael Masterson. This idea that track record, a proven track record, a lengthy track record, a track record with ordinary people, with respected people, a track record with people with all of the weaknesses and handicaps that your marketplace has. A track record establishes your trustworthiness to the marketplace. And then credibility, right? And credibility is different from track record. There are all the credibility elements that you can incorporate in, and those were covered throughout the MFA program. There are 11 different credibility elements that we use throughout your marketing funnel, throughout your post-funnel communications, throughout your follow-up with prospects, post-funnel, during the funnel, etc., to establish this credibility. And then, of course, there is proof, right? And these are the things that we've really covered before. These are the things that you want to, in other words, you want to establish your trustworthiness, or I should really say you need to establish your trustworthiness through the use of track record, credibility, and proof. You also want to sell people on your likability, meaning that, and this is one of the things that we're really going to dive into because this has massive application both throughout your marketing funnel and after the marketing funnel. This is a big factor when it comes to post-funnel communication, when it comes to following up with prospects, post-funnel, prospects who didn't buy yet completed your funnel. Likability is a huge factor. Today, being likable, having a personality that resonates, being memorable, owning a space in your prospect's mind because they like you, they trust you, and all the things that I'm going to cover. There's similarity, there's familiarity, there's all these things that I'm going to cover, increases significantly your conversion potential. And so let's talk a little bit very quickly about the power of likability. Now, this is something that Robert Cialdini covered in depth in his book, Influence. If you haven't read that book yet, I highly recommend it. That's one of those books that you really should read annually. It's one of many books that should be on your annual reading list year in and year out. It's not really a marketing book. It's more of a psychology book, more of a persuasion book on the science of influence book rather than marketing, but it's got massive implications for all entrepreneurs, for all marketers. And a couple of the things that Robert Cialdini talks about, first and foremost, is that likability, being likable, having this relationship with prospects where they not only view you as trustworthy, they not only review you as credible, as believable, as a thought leader, they not only view you as a source of tremendous information, meaning that they view you as a thought leader, as a valuable resource, as an advocate, as all the things that we're going to talk about, but that they view you as somebody that they like. There's just this affinity, right? They like you. You're a likable individual. And fortunately, there's science behind likability. There are some people that are just naturally likable. They've got an attractive, charismatic personality. And then there are individuals that engineer likability. And we're going to talk about how you can engineer likability through your marketing, both during your funnel and following your funnel. Cialdini talks about that individuals in general most prefer to say yes to the requests of somebody that we know and like. And so when you are viewed by prospects as somebody that they like, as somebody that they have an affinity with, when they view you not as a marketer, not as a salesperson, but in their mind as somebody beyond that, potentially as a friend, as somebody that they like, we naturally, psychologically, are more likely to say yes. We want to say yes. We prefer to say yes rather than to say no. It's difficult for us to say no to people that we know and like, right? It's difficult to say no to people that we know and like. And that's why, and I want that to sink in for a second, that it's difficult for people to say no to people that they know and like. And we naturally, psychologically prefer to say yes to the requests made from people that we know and the people that we like. And so when we create and engineer this likability factor, when we create and engineer this relationship, this depth of relationship, this social relationship with prospects, we make them much more likely to say yes. And that's why Cialdini talks about that the strength of a salesperson's likability, right? The strength of that relationship between a salesperson, a marketer, and a prospect, the strength of that bonding based on that likability, the stronger that is, or I should really say, when it is strong, it's twice as likely to make a prospect determine to purchase the product because of that likability rather than just preference for the product. In other words, a prospect is twice as likely to buy a product based on the likability, based on liking the salesperson, liking the marketer, than they are buying a product that they prefer. In other words, that is more valuable than preference for the product. Now, certainly when you make your case for your product and the preference for your product is there and your likability is through the roof because you've engineered it using the things that I'm going to talk about on the next handful of slides, then you've got just the recipe for an incredibly high converting offer. And so let's talk about engineering likability. There are some specific tactics that can be used to engineer likability through your marketing, through your communications. The first one is demonstrating that you have a common goal, demonstrating that you're not an adversary in the relationship, demonstrating that you have a common goal with the prospect. If the if the goal is XYZ, if the goal is for the prospect to finally get in shape, let's say, and stop feeling insecure on the beach, your common goal can't be just to sell as many units of your weight loss program as possible, or to become the #1 selling weight loss product in the marketplace, or to become a multimillionaire from the sale of your product. There's nothing wrong with having those goals, but you need to articulate and demonstrate that you have a common goal. And so this is why often we talk about having a bigger goal beyond a bigger objective beyond just your business and financial goals and objectives. In this case, it could be to help 1 million people reach their ideal goal and to no longer feel insecure, or to help X number of people no longer feel insecure, or because of how you used to feel, or your spouse used to feel, or your mother or father used to feel with their weight issue. You learned everything you could about nutrition and fitness, and therefore you've designed this program because you're sick and tired of seeing people that you care about suffer with this insecurity. And so when you have a common goal, when you are on the same team, you're going to learn more about this. You're going to learn more about the subtleties of this later on. You're able to position yourself alongside of the prospect against a common enemy, which is one of the more common tactics utilized in copywriting, in advertising copywriting, is this common enemy. And so what happens is you become more likable when you have a common goal. First of all, you are similar, you're like them, you have something in common, and we're going to talk about this later on when we get into how to establish rapport and create rapport through your marketing. But when you demonstrate that you have a common goal, you not only come across as similar, but again, you come across as an advocate. Right? You communicate as an advocate for the prospect, and that's what you want to do. You always want to communicate from the position of being an advocate for the prospect, that you are there with their best interest in mind, that you are there to help them achieve the common goal, to help them achieve the common objective. You're on their side, right? And the example that, if we go back to Cialdini in his book Influence, he talks about this whole idea of the whole good cop, bad cop. And why does the whole good cop, bad cop routine work? Well, the whole good cop, bad cop routine works, and the whole good cop, bad cop routine is, bad cop is this individual who comes in all nasty, mean in the individual who's being charged, the suspect's face, right? Like all in their face, all talking to them about doom and gloom, what they're going to be sentenced to, how the case is rock solid, ready to get physical with them, yada, yada, yada. And slowly the good cop starts to talk about, hey, calm down, slow down, take it easy, let's hear him out, yada, yada, yada. Hey, go grab, a soft drink, go grab a cup of coffee for everybody. And then once the bad cop leaves, the good cop looks over and positions himself or herself as, look, I'm basically the only one on your side here. I want to give you the benefit of the doubt, but you got to help me out here. This is what's going to go down, yada, yada, yada. And so what happens is, in that individual's mind, they become an advocate for them. They are on their side. They're no longer combative. They're no longer going head to head, right? And no longer combative. It's why in face-to-face selling and one-on-one selling, often if you can sit on the same side of the desk or the same side of the table as your prospect, it's less combative. It looks less like we're going against each other as it looks and feels when you're on opposite sides of the desk, and it's more like, let's figure this out together. Let's put our heads in this together and figure out the outcome that ultimately we both want to see, that's ultimately in your best interest, right? And so you always want to communicate as an advocate for your prospect. I really first learned this, or really got this, the importance of this mindset, from Jay Abraham. And Jay has this principle that he's taught for since I can remember, and it's this idea that you never want to fall in love with your product, you never want to fall in love with your marketing, you want to fall in love with your customers, and you want to be an advocate for them. You not only want to communicate as an advocate and position yourself as an advocate, but you truly want to be an advocate. And so this is the idea that when you communicate, you're communicating from a position of you're with them. You're on the same side as them, right? When we have an advocate in our corner, when we have somebody who, let's say, just looking at these first two bullets here, when we meet somebody that has a similar goal, a common goal, right? If we're trying to communicate, if we're trying to get a law changed or something like that, or a rule changed in our workplace, in somebody's workplace, let's just say, and somebody else comes along and they also have that same goal to get that same law or same rule changed, and they look to you and they say, look, I'm here to support you in whatever way I can, and I'm going to do everything in my power to get you in front of the right person to deliver the right message because I believe in you and I believe in this goal. We like that person, right? We have that person becomes naturally likable to us. And so this is the type of positioning that you want to include in your marketing, in your communications. You want to communicate as an advocate, from a position of an advocate for the prospect. And a great example of this is when you let's say post funnel, when you deliver just awesome free content, or when you, let's say in some markets, you pass on a great discount or a great coupon code that you found. You're not getting anything in return for passing on the coupon code, but you did a little research, you found it for them, you're sending it out via email to them, you're not asking for anything else, you're not making them jump through hoops, you're just giving it to them because you know that that's what your marketplace wants, you know that that's what people have asked you for. And that shows them that you are an advocate for them, that you're in their corner, that you're a supporter of them. It also builds goodwill, it taps into reciprocity, a whole bunch of other things. But that's an example, just one of many examples of coming from the position of being an advocate. Of course, anytime you can use flattery or be complimentary, praise your prospect in your communications, you become that much more likable, right? If your marketplace is savvy, if your customers are savvy, and you say that to them and it's heartfelt, if you say, like, when I look at the individuals in the MTAM program, these are individuals that get it, that everybody listening to this, watching this, you get it. You're the real deal. You are marketers that I would put you up against a team of virtually any other set of marketers that have gone through any other program. When you're able to praise your prospects, praise your customers, when you're able to compliment them on an action, right? These are things that individuals crave, human beings crave. Individuals don't get complimented enough. They aren't praised praised enough. I don't like the word flattery because it seems like puffery, and look, I'm not going to say anything to anybody that I don't mean. That's just a personal, from an integrity perspective. But if your goal, similar to the way you lead your company, without going on a tangent, but similar to the way you should be the leader of your company when it comes to your team, when it comes to outsourcers, when it comes to employees, looking for things to praise, looking for the positive, not looking for the negative, but looking for the positive, looking for the good, and then calling them out on that and focusing on that. The same thing with your prospects. When you have the ability to compliment them, when you have the ability to praise them, do it, because it translates into increased likability for you. The next one in terms of engineering likability is frequency of contact. And frequency of contact just means that the more frequently you are out in front of your prospects, the more frequently you communicate with them, assuming that you are delivering value and you're doing it with personality, right? Value, personality, and under personality, I would put entertainment, where you're delivering valuable content, quality information, but it's being delivered with your unique voice, your unique personality, and there's an entertainment value there. Understand, just as a side note, that people could get information anywhere. Quality information, great information is not what's going to retain customers. It's not what's going to retain readers of your blog, prospects, leads, because there's tons of sources of great information. Your unique perspective on that great information, your unique personality, your unique angle, your unique take on that is what's going to keep people coming back. And equally as important, if not more important, is the relationship that they have with you. Right? It was legendary copywriter Gary Halbert who said, look, customers come to you for the benefits. They stay with you because of the relationship that they have with you. And that relationship needs to get built on you being likable, right? And so the more you contact, the more frequently you contact your prospects, your customers, the more familiar they become with you. And the more familiar we are with something, the more we tend to like it, the more comfortable we are with it. Right? And so you want to make sure that your frequency of contact is there to develop that familiarity, right? So that they become familiar with you and that familiarity becomes comfortable for them, right? When somebody communicates with you once a month or once every 2 months, there's no feeling of familiarity, and therefore there's no feeling of relationship. There's no feeling of closeness, of bond, right? Versus if we hear from somebody once a week, let's just say, compared to once a month or once every other month, that once a week individual, we're going to have a lot more familiarity with, and therefore we're going to feel more comfortable with, and therefore we're going to like that individual more. You also want to leverage association with already likable public figures in your niche. And so anytime you can leverage association with these likable public figures, this is now, I'm not talking about now leveraging association for credibility, right? That's different. In this context, I'm talking about who is likable in your niche. Who is somebody that people associate with fun in your niche, cool in your niche. And look, not everybody that has that view in every niche is going to be appropriate for you to associate with. There are certain individuals in certain niches that are viewed as, let's say, super cool, that just it's not my thing, and it's not the type of approach that I would personally want to be associated with. And so there are others, though, that I would want to be associated with that are considered fun and cool and likable and just good, down-to-earth people. And you need to figure out who those are in your niche. Now, when I say leverage association, there are a lot of ways to leverage association, right? And there are creative ways to leverage association, and we can certainly talk about these on our next Q&A, or any Q&A for that matter, but there are lots of creative ways to leverage association. There's leveraging real association if you have a real deal relationship with any of these likable public figures in your niche. There's also other ways to leverage them, quoting them, talking about them in a positive light, of course, to your niche. there becomes this association with that already likable individual and you. You also want to leverage existing positive psychological associations in follow-up communications. And so what I mean by this is that, let's say, for example, you are you're communicating to a niche that is primarily 70s kids, or individuals that were born in the 70s. Right, and so individuals that were born in the in the early 70s, let's just say, potentially late 60s, let's say, they are, let's say, familiar with Brady Bunch and the Brady Bunch, the television show, just for example, or things like Atari and Commodore 64, and there are certain things that I associate with, let's say, my childhood, right? And when those things are referenced, there's this natural existing psychological association that I have with that, right? If I got, let's say, if I got an email from somebody and it talked about, it's as much, they said something like, it's as much fun as when I used to play Atari as a kid, right? There's a couple of things going on there, a couple of subtle things. First of all, there's this feeling of similarity, right? The similar, that we're similar, we're the same, we have something in common. And that is, number one, that we're probably around the same age, or roughly the same age. That I used to play Atari when I was a little kid. And so we used to do the same things. And so, wow, I could probably hang out with this person and we could reminisce together about our childhood. And so we've got something in common, right? And so it starts to foster this whole rapport process. We start to develop this rapport. At the same time, it also triggers in my mind this positive association where I remember the days of playing, those carefree days without a worry in the world. Man, those were the good times. And now, by leveraging that existing psychological association, what happens is now my mind starts to associate him with that existing psychological association, right? And so, in other words, he's now connected himself to existing positive associations in my mind with that reference. And so this is why the better you know your prospects, the more you understand them, the more you understand them demographically, the more you understand them psychologically, psychographically, the more you understand who they are, what makes them tick, the more in-depth you get there, the more of this leveraging you can do, the more of those psychological associations, the more of that flicking of that switch you could make happen with the way you communicate. But those things generate and engineer ability for you when you're able to trigger them. At the same time, you want to avoid the association with having you associated with pure bad news, when that bad news doesn't coincide with a solution or positive outcome. And what I mean by that is that, if you're going to do a promotion or a campaign of some sort, or you're going to write a blog post, an article, or do a video, or host a webinar, teleseminar, or Google Hangout, whatever it may be, that begins with, let's say, or has bad news, or focuses on the negative trends going on in the niche, in the marketplace, in the profession, whatever it is that you're doing, there always has to be a positive side. There always has to be a solution so that you look like the hero. If you are just the bearer of bad news, what happens is, over time, you become associated with bad news, with negative news. It's why oftentimes, to use the expression, a tattletale, is over time becomes associated with just this negativity. They in the leader's mind, that individual just becomes this individual who is always reporting negative, who's negative, that individual might have nothing to do with the problem or problems that are going on, but because they're constantly the bearer of bad news, there develops an association over time. And so anytime you deliver bad news or you deliver a trend, a negative trend to your marketplace, to prospects, you always want to make sure that it coincides with a solution, with a positive outcome. So for example, if there's a negative trend going on in your marketplace and you come across a story on CNBC or Fox News or something like that, for example, don't just copy that article and then send out a link to it in an email as part of a follow-up, thinking that you're doing something good by keeping your prospects and marketplace up to date with something. Because over time, if you continually do that, you will become associated with bad news, which decreases likability. And so anytime you deliver bad news, make sure that it always coincides with a solution or positive outcome so that you are the hero, so that you're delivering bad news, which, look, if it's news, you want to keep your prospects and customers updated, that's great, but just make sure that there's a positive side that you're going to aid them with, that ultimately you're going to help them with that outcome. You're going to help them with the solution. There's a solution and you're bringing it to them, right? Because if you have no solution, if you have no help for them, then all you're doing is bringing up fears. You're the person now responsible for negative emotions, anxieties, discomfort, frustrations, and so on. And so that's a no-no, which is also why, when possible, if you can have negative news from your company come from somebody else on your team, you're better off doing that. And so oftentimes, if let's say a call has to be rescheduled or something like that, a coaching call or a Q&A call, or there's a delay on the delivery of something, have that contact come from a different team member, right? Have it come from a customer support person, your virtual assistant, your live assistant, whatever. If you have a finance manager, whoever it is, if need be, on your team, have it come from somebody else. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't address the negative news in a follow-up email or follow-up communication the next day, but the actual delivery of the bad news, have it come from somebody else. So like I said, if there's a delay in a product or something like that, and you can have it come from somebody else on your team, do it. Now, keep in mind that these last two bullets, the pure bad news, avoiding that negative association, and having negative news come from another team member, this is not, it's not going to hurt your likability if every, if once or twice a year you're delivering, bad news about the delay of a product or something like that to your market. But if done enough, it will absolutely decrease likability. And so just keep that in the back of your mind. Also, just kind of a final little point here with likability. Don't appear in a video if your physical appearance conflicts with the expected standard of the marketplace. And this is like, look, this might sound harsh. It might sound like, but look, here's the deal. If you are talking to doctors, for example, and you have a mohawk, for example, nothing wrong with a mohawk, but if you have a mohawk, you should not be on camera, because immediately what's going to happen is you are going to break any rapport that you may have, or you're going to immediately halt the rapport building process, because number one, you don't look like them, so you're not like them. And as we're going to talk about, this whole idea of rapport is that people like people that are most like themselves. People like people that are most like themselves, right? And so it's why if you walked into a room of 12 people, we naturally, sometimes unconsciously, scan the room and look for the person, right? If there was an open seat next to each one of those 12 people, you will either, if you're a guy, you will either scan the room and look for the person that's most like you. Let's say if you're married like me, I'm gonna sit down next to somebody. I would sit down next to somebody who I would find most interesting if I'm gonna have any kind of conversation. But the average individual will look for the person that represents what is most like them. So the typical guy would look for that or look for the hottest girl in the room. But the point is that people like people that are like themselves. And so in that example, doctors would look at that individual with the mohawk as that's not at all like me, and that's not what I would expect from a, let's say, a marketing professional, from a practice management professional, from a whatever, from an online expert. Now, if you were selling motorcycles, right? Let's say, well, then that's cool. If you were selling BMX bikes or motocross bikes or something like that, or tattoos, then that's cool, right? But the point is that don't appear on a video. Don't actually appear on camera if your physical appearance conflicts with the expected standard, right? And at a bare minimum, if it conflicts with what the prospects or customers expect from somebody of your status or the positioning that you're trying to achieve, then you shouldn't appear on camera. And certainly if it conflicts with what's expected and it's completely opposite, it's the antithesis of the way the marketplace looks, then you absolutely shouldn't be on camera. You'd be better off with an on-camera talent or doing screen capture or doing another medium. And so that's important. If we went back to Cialdini, and there's other research that that talks about, it talks about that physical appearance has a huge, or plays a huge role in likability, in rapport, in charisma, in confidence that we place in individuals. Whether we like to admit it or not, individuals that are more attractive, we naturally have more confidence in them. They're naturally more believable. They tend to command more respect, more attention. And physical appearance plays a role. I'm sharing this with you, this little bullet, because as on-camera video, really being out in front of your marketplace where they can see you, it's valuable. But it's only valuable if it doesn't conflict with the expected standard of the marketplace. And so, but that's all about rapport and similarity. And so let's talk about engineering prospect rapport. I already said that, prospect rapport is, rapport is this idea that people like and trust people that are most like themselves, right? We just naturally migrate towards people that are most like us. Now, oftentimes, when you're selling one-on-one, salespeople, they'll try to create rapport with, we're the fan, like by talking about, you like the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, I like the Pittsburgh Steelers. You grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey. You hung out at the Jersey Shore. I hung out at the Jersey Shore. And all of those things, if legitimate, play a factor in rapport. But those things are extremely difficult to duplicate when you're not selling one-on-one, right? When you're talking to a marketplace. But the cool thing is that the science of persuasion and influence shows us that if your feelings and beliefs are in common with prospects, that it has the same rapport building impact. And so it's why you want to start and include statements that reveal that you share these similar beliefs and interests and feelings with prospects, right? When you can show that show that the common feelings, the common emotions, the things that they feel, the things that the emotions that they have, the concerns that they have, the beliefs that they have, specific to the marketplace, specific to the problem that you're going to focus on, specific to the solution, the outcome, the result, the benefit that they're after, the more rapport you establish. And so this is, it's important, and it's why if you look at, let's say, copy from Eugene Schwartz of Breakthrough Advertising, another book that should absolutely be on your annual book list. You should read that book every single year. Individuals like, I remember Jay Abraham, Clayton Makepeace, some of the top marketing minds, copywriters in the world talk about, most of the time they focus the majority of their reading annually on the classics, on the same books over and over and over every year with just a couple of new ones put in, but they'll constantly read Breakthrough Advertising. They'll constantly read the Robert Collier Letter Book. They'll constantly read Tested Advertising Methods by Caples. They'll constantly read Triggers by Joe Sugarman and so on. And so I don't even remember where I was going with that. Why I started to talk about their books. Oh, I started to talk about how Eugene Schwartz will talk about, one of the most important things that you can do to create this rapport, to create this relationship in any kind of marketing piece, in any kind of advertisement, is to start off by generating agreement, right? By getting agreement, by getting the prospect to nod their head in agreement. And the safest way to do that is by starting with things that they already believe, starting with things that they already feel, starting with emotions that they already have, and getting agreement, right? And so it's taking something that the marketplace is already feeling, saying internally, something that the internal dialogue that they're already having, and starting with that so that they get their head nodding in agreement, right? Because it creates this rapport and it makes it easier for them to agree with the things that you introduce later on, right? And so you want to continue to get agreement. In your mind, there should be these agreements that they acknowledge throughout your communications. And the other thing is that in this second bullet, what you'll see here is that I said show common feelings and emotions. I didn't say talk about common feelings and emotions. Show, demonstrate, which is the word I originally had before I changed it to show. Show common feelings and emotions. Demonstrate common feelings and emotions. Display common feelings and emotions in your writing. The emotions that you know that they're having as it relates to the problem that you're talking about. The feelings that you know they're having as it relates to the problem that you're talking about. You need to express them, not just acknowledge them, not just point to them as having those feelings and emotions, but you need to actually display them. They want to know from you that you have the same feelings and emotions, not just that you understand their feelings and emotions, but that you have them. They'll know that you know what they're feeling. You know what emotions they have when you display those emotions in your writing. And so, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a bit, and how you actually do that. But you want to display these common feelings and emotions. And by doing that, by actually giving a voice to what the prospect is actually feeling, the emotions that they're having, you actually give them an emotional outlet. You provide prospects with an emotional outlet. It's finally someone who gets me, and finally somebody is saying what I've been thinking, what I've been feeling, right? What I've been saying to myself all this time. That's the reaction that you want them to have. That's part of engineering this rapport with prospects. You also want to reveal a weakness or frustration that you share in common. Now, this doesn't have to necessarily be current. It certainly can be current. If you have a frustration, if you share a frustration or a weakness that they have, you currently have that, as long as it's not a deal breaker, so to speak, because as long as it doesn't, it's not something that if you revealed it, they wouldn't trust you or you'd lose credibility, then share it. You can also reveal weaknesses and frustrations that you have had in the past that are common with what it is that they're having. Again, this creates that feeling of similarity, that we have something in common, right? Weaknesses or frustrations that you share in common. Good example of this is how my good friend Rich Schefren at Strategic Profits will regularly talk about how he has ADD and how he suffers from perfectionism, and how it impacts or how it often rears its ugly head, and how he has to fight this daily battle against this perfectionism. And so he shares that with people, and when other individuals have ADD and or perfectionism, they can very much relate to him, and they have a special bond. Most of the time, the most heartfelt communications that used to come in when I was doing the marketing, running the marketing for Strategic Profits for Rich, would be when he talked about one of his weaknesses or one of his frustrations that were common with individuals. They'd be so thankful that he shared that because they felt like, wow, somebody who gets it, somebody who knows what it is that I'm feeling, knows what it is that I'm struggling with, who gets it, right? And let me just say this, that this isn't done superficially. This isn't just like on a whim where I say, hey, by the way, I got ADD and then move on, right? Because just like everything when it comes to marketing is how you say it, what words you use. If you're speaking it via, let's say, video or audio, teleseminar, webinar, whatever it may be, there's inflection, tone, pace, right? All of those things. If you're writing, if it's an email, if it's in a blog post, if it's in a PDF report, if it's in a long-form sales letter, it's all in your word choice. It's all in your sentence structure, right? It's all in how you say it and how you create that bond. Also, when it comes to rapport, when it comes to increasing that that familiarity level, you want to include your picture or the voice behind the product or service. Include your picture or image more often. Right, and you'll see, for example, with, let's say, hypothetically, not hypothetically, like with the MTAM emails, my picture is in every one. With the MFA emails, my picture is in every one. The more you can keep your image out in front of your market, your consumers, the more familiar they become with you. The more familiar they are with you when they associate, they begin to associate your face with trustworthiness, with credibility, right? With somebody that's an advocate for them, somebody that cares, somebody that's on their side, somebody that's on their team. And so having this picture, this image, again, it creates this familiarity. If you look at many of Clayton Makepeace's winning promotions, or I should really say controls for Weiss Financial, you'll see that that he would always use pictures of Weiss throughout all of the winners. All of the controls have at least one picture, if not multiple pictures, all the time, and it creates this familiarity. Of course, you always want to have some face, some recognizable face behind every product. If it's not you, it could be somebody else, but you always want to have a face behind every product, just as a side note. You also want, and this is a little bit beyond the scope of of prospect rapport, engineering prospect rapport, but you ultimately want to be the only big viable solution to the problem, to the situation that they're in, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to elaborate on this. There's a whole slide where I get into this heroic positioning of your offer. But the thing that I want to focus on here is that when your offer becomes the big viable solution for them, right? You become this savior. You become the hero, right? They're grateful for the interaction. They're grateful for having read your copy, watched your video, gone on your webinar, gone to your Google Hangout, or whatever it may be, right? And so that's why it's heroic positioning, because you become the hero. The part of this that's a little bit beyond the scope of this module is making it the only big viable solution. You should always be, through your marketing, you should always orchestrate and engineer your marketing so that at the end, your product or service is the only real solution, that it meets all the criteria that you've established, right? All the buying criteria, that it doesn't have the negatives that you've covered, right? That, in other words, that at the end, your product or service is the only real solution. And therefore, by taking advantage of your offer, you become the hero. Right? And that creates more rapport. If somebody told you, look, your house is on fire, and here is a hose, a direct line to water. Other than that, there's no other water around here. If you wait for the fire department, your house is going to burn down. Right? That individual now, that offer to take that hose from them becomes this hero. right? They become the savior to you, and you immediately have a level of rapport with them. You immediately like them more. You immediately have a bond with them because they saved you, right? Because they helped you, because they were an advocate and came to your aid. Now, as you're going to learn in just a bit, this whole process of making sure that your offer has this heroic positioning, as I call it, begins with establishing that deep trouble, that dire situation, that problem at the beginning of your funnel, let's say, or your communication. This can be done one-off as well, and it's backed by proof and credibility. And so what I mean by that is that, one of the basic formulas for selling, for marketing, is problem, agitate, solve, right? Identify the problem that the prospect is having, agitate that problem, meaning show them how it's going to get worse if they don't take action, what the outcome is going to be if they don't take the right action, and then solve the problem, offer them the solution. And so that's really what this is saying here, that of course the bigger the problem, the more dire the situation, the deeper the trouble, the more of a hero you become when you offer them the solution, right? The more heroic. And the key is that when you are painting this picture of this dire situation, when you're dramatizing the situation that they're in and the outcome, the result, where they are going, it needs to be believable, right? It needs to be believed, and you make it believable, or you ensure that it's believed by backing up your story with proof and credibility, right? When you offer proof for what you're saying, it's one thing to just get up in front of a room of prospects and deliver a story or outline this whole disaster that awaits them right around the corner if they don't take a certain action. It's another thing to do that and offer proof for every point that you make, backed up with why you are a credible source and they should listen to you, right? That makes that dire situation believable. And when you combine that dire situation, when you combine that dire situation with a believable enemy, with a believable cause behind the dire situation, and this is where we're getting into that common enemy that I referenced earlier, it creates massive contrast with you, who's their advocate. In other words, when you take this dire situation that you just showed them, and you showed them that they're in this dire situation, and you made it believable with proof and credibility, and you showed them how the cause of all this, or the reason why they're in this situation, is because of that enemy, that believable enemy that they have, and then you're able to offer this incredible solution. You've just created massive contrast for yourself. You become this incredibly valuable advocate for them, which again just increases likability and increases rapport. Another way to increase rapport, and I'm going to show you an example of this, is you want to personalize all communications. And really what I mean by this is, I'm not saying personalize their communications in terms of using their name necessarily. But I'm really talking more about talking direct, talking to one person at a time, not using words like we, but using words like you and your as often as possible. I've talked about this in the past, especially throughout the MFA program, where anytime you use the word I in a sentence, if you can tweak the sentence so that you can use the word you and equally communicate the underlying message that you want to communicate, that sentence will have more power to the prospect. Because as you already know as a marketer, prospects don't care about the unwashed masses. They don't care about everybody else. They don't care about others. They don't care about you. They don't care about your company. They care about themselves. Right, and that's whether you're in B2C, B2B. It doesn't matter whether you're whether you're selling to consumers, whether you're selling to businesses. You're always talking to one person, and so you want to use the words you and your as often as possible, and you want to talk from one person to another. Now, let me give you an example of Let me give you an example of something here of the showing that common feelings and emotions, and then I'm going to show you an example of how you can tweak the typical like I statement into a you and your statement. This is a simple example from a promotion of look at how this person starts off. This is about your digestive aid, and it starts off by saying it's simply not fair. Some people were born lucky and have a digestive system that never gives them any trouble. They can eat a big bowl of spicy chili or a double helping of baked beans with no problem whatsoever. Right? It's simply not fair. Right? They're expressing the emotion that many people have already. That's a simple example, but it's an example of they're not just saying you might think it's not fair, you probably think it's not fair, or lots of people think it's not fair, but they're actually communicating that. And there are other examples, there are many, many examples within controls of where the writer, the marketer, the copywriter actually expresses those emotions more powerfully than the prospect would if they could write it down. But what that does is that creates enormous rapport because, again, you're expressing what it is that the prospect is thinking and feeling, the emotions that they're having. You're giving them an emotional outlet. You're acting as their mouthpiece, and that's incredibly attractive psychologically to prospects. Here's an example of how to make everything about them, right? Here's a common, statement. Let's say X millions of elderly Americans fall victim to diabetes every year. Right. So if we were selling a diabetes product or a diabetes book or something like that, we might want to start to paint this negative picture. Let's say, X millions of elderly Americans fall victim to diabetes every year. Well, compare that statement to if you're over the age of 60 and live in America, your chances are X in 10 of developing diabetes this year, right? We're communicating the same message, but we're making it about them. If you are over the age of 60, right? We're really saying if you're over the age of 60, if you live in America, your chances of developing diabetes are X in 10 this year. That's about them. See how we were able to take a statement that was about the masses, that they don't really care about. That's not, and it doesn't have an emotional impact on them. And we changed it to make it about them. Here's another one. My software users saw an average increase in income last year of $650,000. Right? This is commonly this is a common way of that you see lots of marketers make a statement. They'll try to use this as a proof element or something like that. Here's another way of saying it. If you had let my software go to work for you last year, you could have seen an increase in your income of almost $650,000, just like it did on average for the rest of our software users. This is now about you. Look, if you had let my software go to work for you, you could have seen an increase in your income of almost $650,000, right? And I mean, so it's about them. Very simple example, how you can take copy, how you can take a script for a video, script for a video on an opt-in page or webinar, teleseminar, whatever, and make sure that it's focused on your prospect and not you, your company, or the masses, or this vague generality that will not elicit emotions from your prospects. Now let's talk about that enemy, right? That fleshing out the enemy, bringing out this enemy. Anytime that you can position yourself with the prospect on the same side, both with the common goal of fighting this enemy, this believable enemy, right? Again, believable enemy, you will be more likable and have greater rapport. And so the way you go about fleshing out the enemy, there's kind of like mainly 3 steps to this process. First, you can ask yourself, what enemy is making your prospect feel powerless, insulted, frustrated, angry? Right? What enemy out there is giving your prospect this feeling, is frustrating your prospect, is feeling like they've got no options, is rendering your prospect feeling powerless, feeling insulted? Right? What enemy is it? Is it the government? Is it their profession? Is it the economy? Is it their competition? Is it their lack of knowledge? Is it their staff? What is it, right? Now, ultimately, when you make this list and you want to identify the strongest. But here's the thing, you want to dimensionalize the enemy fully. You want to have a real picture of the enemy. You want to have details of the enemy. Vague generalities don't sell. Specifics sell, right? Specifics are believable. Specifics sell. And so you want to dimensionalize the enemy fully. What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? Where is it? Where does it live? Where does it breathe? What does it do? How does it operate? How does it function? How does it render them powerless, or make them feel powerless, I should say? How does it frustrate them? What does it do? How does it come across? All of those things. Dimensionalize the enemy as fully as you possibly can. And here's a golden tip for you. Personalize the enemy. Anytime you can make the enemy more personal, not personable, more personal, more tangible, right? It becomes more powerful, right? If it's not just the big banks, if it's Bank of America and TD Bank, then say it, use it. Be more personal. There are times when certain copywriters will actually name names, right, of, let's say various institutions or various organizations or various individuals, because it makes it more real. It's this vivid picture, this tangible picture that strikes more emotion, that resonates more, right, when it is personalized. When you're taking it from this vague entity, just the government. Is it the government? Is it Congress? Is it senators? Is it specific senators? Is it 3 senators? Who are they? What are their names? Personalize it. Make it real. Right? And then what you want to do is identify the things that the enemy does that frustrates or upsets your prospects, that costs your prospects money, that insults your prospects' intelligence, that renders your prospects feeling powerless, and list all these out and then rank them in order of impact on your prospect's life, right? And so what are the things that the enemy does, whatever that enemy is, right, for your prospects? List them, rank them in order. Then pinpoint how you feel about these kinds of people, the enemy, right? How do you feel about these kinds of people, and how would you feel if those things were being done to you? The things that the enemy is doing to your prospects, the enemy is doing to the marketplace, how would you feel, right? And here is where you want to get in tune with this. This is where you need to internalize this. You need to get in touch with these feelings and emotions. One of the most valuable things that you can do as a marketer is to become more in tune with your own emotions, your own feelings. Why does something make you feel good? Why does something make you feel bad? What emotion are you experiencing now? How would you articulate it? How would you describe it? How does it feel physically? How does it feel mentally? How does it feel emotionally? How does it feel psychologically, right? Because it helps you to be more in tune with the emotions and feelings of your prospect. Because once you've done this, right? Who's the enemy? Identify the things that the enemy does, pinpoint how you feel, and how you'd feel if those things were being done to you. Now it's about verbalize your full emotional response to the enemy, right? Now it's about bringing out your full emotional response. What's the emotional response that you have to the enemy, right? Because again, what this is doing is this is showing the prospect that you get how they feel, that they're going to, for the first time, somebody gets me, somebody understands me, somebody knows how I'm feeling, somebody feels how I'm feeling, somebody is thinking about this situation the way I'm thinking about this situation, right? And so you want to verbalize that full emotional response. And when you're doing this for your rough draft, for your first draft, let it fly, let it flow, get the emotion out. The best copywriters are able to get themselves into an emotional state when they're writing the emotional copy, whether that be copy for a script, whether that be copy for a webinar, a teleseminar, whether that, copy for a video, audio, whatever, for a landing page, for a sales letter, for an email sequence, whatever it may be. When you're writing emotional copy, when you are articulating the emotions and feelings that your prospects have, get into that emotional state. Get in touch with those emotions and let them flow onto paper and edit them later on, right? And acknowledge and validate your prospects' feelings of powerlessness. So the fact that you've got this emotional response that's coming out about the enemy, showing your prospects that you get how they feel. You also want to acknowledge and validate that your prospects are feeling this powerlessness, that they're feeling stuck, that they're feeling like they're in a catch-22, that they're between a rock and a hard place, however you want to describe it, right? And you do that through this venting, this verbalizing of this full emotional response, right? So you verbalize the emotional response to the enemy to act as that to kind of help the prospect get it out. You become their voice, and then you want to acknowledge that after that emotional response, right, that you understand, that you recognize that they are feeling like, well, what am I going to do? I'm stuck, right? This feeling of powerlessness. You say to them, but it's not your fault, right? And that's a common copywriting tactic. It's not your fault. Taking the onus off of the prospect and putting it to the enemy. It's not your fault. It's because, big government's been slamming. It's not your fault. It's because XYZ never taught you how to do this. It's not your fault. It's because nobody ever told you that you have a thyroid disorder. It's not your fault that these over-the-counter vitamin supplements don't have the actual nutrient that you need, right? And so you are acting as their mouthpiece, you're validating their feeling of powerlessness, and you are pointing to the enemy as the cause. Tremendous rapport building going on here, where they look at you as like, this person gets me totally. You're simpatico, so to speak, right? Like you are this trusted resource that they believe in, right? And so all those things, right? And this is where we get to that heroic positioning of your offer, right? That you build up uncomfortable emotion, all the feelings and emotions associated with the problem, right? That dire situation. And the only way to release those awful feelings of powerlessness and frustration and anxiety and disappointment is through the acceptance of your offer. And so really there's another way to say this, that by presenting your offer, you're showing the prospect, you're giving the prospect the opportunity to release those awful feelings, to get rid of those awful feelings associated with that dire situation, right? By accepting your offer, right? Through the acceptance of your offer, they release those awful feelings. And so that offer, that becomes the hero. Like I said earlier on, you become the hero. You become the savior. Your offer is perfect for them. It's perfect timing. It's exactly what they need. They're thankful. They're grateful for it, which again creates rapport. Now understand something. It's, the reason why I've driven deep into this, because you don't get the same rapport building, you don't get the same level of bonding if that dire situation isn't there, if the solution isn't urgently needed, if the problem isn't massive, right? If there's not this common enemy that you are fighting with the prospect against. When you present the solution, not only do you not get the same level of response, but you don't get the same level of bonding. You don't get the same level of rapport. You don't get the same level, you don't achieve the same level of likability. It's this combination, like I said, of all of these things, of the dire situation, of the believable enemy, of the heroic positioning of your offer. It's all of these things combined that make for just incredible bonding with your prospects. And so again, the acceptance of your offer is what releases or allows them to release those awful feelings. It's the acceptance of your offer that allows the prospect to feel as if they're getting revenge on the enemy. It's the acceptance of your offer that allows the prospect to take a big, bold step in the direction of their goals and dreams. And here's something that a quote from a junior copywriter from Clayton Makepeace. It says, again, communicate with the voice of an advocate who acknowledges and validates your prospect's sense of powerlessness, his frustration regarding the problem, and his anger against an enemy that has been fighting dirty, right? And that's what we're doing. That's everything that I've shared with you. So let me go on to wrap this up. This was a quick module, just over an hour, with a couple of final, what I call bonding communication nuggets. And these are kind of just random things that I wanted to quickly cover that didn't have a place elsewhere. The first one is you want to judge all of your communications with prospects, both during your funnel, of course, and post-funnel, by how close that communication feels to the type of communication that two friends would have sitting down and chatting about a topic, right? And here's the thing. This is really important. Your writing should never feel like writing. It should feel like a conversation. When you have a sales letter, for example, it's not about, the prospect should get caught up in the story, in the benefits, in the drama, not in the reading, right? People get tired when they're reading and they're aware that they're reading, but when they get sucked into a story, when they get sucked into a drama, when they get sucked into this whirlwind of benefits and excitement and solution and problems being relieved and their dreams and aspirations being fulfilled, right? That's when they go, they get sucked in, exactly like I said. And so your communications should never feel like writing. Like, it's not about, when you have a video, let me give you a subtle but critical point here. When you do a video, whether it be a video for your squeeze page, a video for your sales page, you never want the video to be the focal point. It's the message, it's the story, it's the benefits, it's the drama that you want them to get sucked into. Anytime the video has so many bells and whistles and so many graphics and images and motions and animations that it takes away from the message, that's a no-no, right? And I've seen videos that were done, expensive videos that were done by professional companies where they looked really awesome, but it took away from the drama, the story, the underlying message, right? And that's the same thing with your writing. You don't want your writing to be impressive. You don't want your writing to be the glaring thing that sticks out at them. You want the writing to be transparent, and so that they're getting sucked into the story, the drama of your communication. That's why it should not feel like writing. It should feel like a conversation. It should read like a conversation. It should feel like a conversation. It should give them the sense that they're involved in a conversation. This is why you should also use, as most of you probably know, use common, friendly figures of speech. Things that are typical of normal conversation. Cliches and analogies and similes, right? And metaphors. The things that you would commonly use, the regular, the what are often the trite sayings that are common, that are part of normal parts of conversation, you should include those in your communications. Include those common figures of speech, because that's what makes your communication feel like conversation, right? When it reads like conversation, when it's worded like conversation, when it uses words and phrases and grammar and punctuation to feel like a conversation, that's what it gets accepted as, right? And there's a level of bonding that happens, rather than this corporate speak, this corporate feel, this corporate style that doesn't elicit bonding, and if anything, hurts likability, hurts rapport, and hurts the bonding process. Use jargon sparingly. Jargon, technical words and phrases. I'm not talking about using them in this context to create credibility here. I'm talking about use jargon so that you can demonstrate respect for prospects' intelligence. Show them that you respect their intelligence by using jargon sparingly. Use their technical terms, right? By using technical terms that you know that is, the vernacular of the niche that they know, right, is commonplace in the niche, but it's really only commonplace in the niche. You demonstrate respect for your prospect's intelligence, which makes you more likable and fosters a bond, right? Using something like, saying pay per click, or search engine optimization to your typical internet marketer, we know that most internet marketers know what, search engine optimization is, at least if they've been around the block for any significant length of time. When you don't say search engine optimization and you try to say it another way to totally dummy it down, you come across as talking down to the marketplace and not respecting their intelligence, and that hurts your likability and the bonding process. You want to sparingly use some jargon that you know across the board the niche understands to demonstrate that you respect their intelligence. It just makes you more likable. Of course, we always want to. We always like individuals that that believe that we are intelligent, right? I already said transparency is the key. Not transparency in admitting your faults, that sort. In this context, it's see right through your words to the conversation and the benefits. What should suck them in is not the magnificence of your writing, not the magnificence of your speaking ability, not the magnificence of your clothes on camera, but is the conversation, is the benefits, is the story, the drama, right? That's what they should be drawn in by, not the thing, not the writing, not the wording. It's also why, like on a web page, when there's too much noise and there's too many formatting bells and whistles, there's too much highlighting, there's too many arrows, there's too many graphics, there's too many, it creates noise. What they end up seeing is they end up seeing the sales letter, right? And it's no longer transparent. And now they're focused on the sales letter, and they're focused on that they're reading a sales letter, and they're not getting sucked into the story, into the drama. That's why, again, if you look at some of the biggest and best, most successful direct response marketers, individuals or companies like Agora, Boardroom, you'll see that a significant percentage of their long-form sales letters are ugly. White background, mainly text. They might have some graphs and charts, but very little. They typically don't have the hand-drawn stuff. They don't have a lot of doodles or anything like that. Very, very simple, because they want the page to be transparent. They want the focus, the focal point, to be on the story. The conversation, the benefits. Lastly, always give real valuable content to your prospects, right? And I really said that at the beginning of this module. You always want to give real valuable content to your prospects. You can even give real valuable content, as you learned, in your marketing funnel, right? Give real world actionable stuff. Don't hold back, your actionable content. Give valuable information. Part of the EBM process is giving valuable information, giving stuff that's good, that's gold nugget, that individuals would potentially pay for, right? Because there's a whole psychological impact there. It taps into the law of reciprocity. It demonstrates expertise. It taps into that whole, hey, if they're giving this away for free, I wonder what their paid stuff is. It allows you to demonstrate certain principles, but it also bonds, right? It also bonds. It builds goodwill with individuals. It makes you more likable, right? Because people are, most people, most companies, most businesses, most marketers, most salespeople are constantly looking for to take something from prospects, to get something from prospects. And so when you become an individual that delivers real value and delivers real, actionable, valuable content to your prospects, and I don't care what the niche is, you can always deliver real, valuable content to your prospects, you just become more likable. You develop a greater bond. And this is critical because, like I said, and we're going to end this module really the same way we started the module, a bonding, having this bond, being likable, having this relationship with your prospects is one of the most powerful persuasion principles there is. It's one of the most influential factors you can possess. And like Gary Halbert said, to quote him again, people come to you for the benefits, but they stay for the relationship. And so that's it for Module 5. Talk to you soon in our next module and our Q&A calls. Talk to you soon, everybody.